Glenlivet and then the Glenturret. Okay, I hope you're all caught up. I'm not going to be repeating myself, so if any of you get this wrong, that's on you. I'm sorry. But welcome. If you are new here, please get involved with your tasting notes. If you have any questions you want to ask our guests, please get involved. Very open community here. There's no question that's too silly. There's no tasting note that's too silly. Our guests absolutely love to hear your tasting notes. So please get involved with all of that. And yes, as you'll see, Jess isn't here tonight, my usual co-host. So I'm having to kind of chat with myself at this bit, and it's boring everybody. So I'm going to get straight to it, and we're going to get straight to the drams. So good evening, everybody. Welcome. And we are going to start in Japan, talking about Miyagikyo with Nathan. Nathan, how's it going?
All good, thank you. How are you doing?
I am not too bad, thank you. Not too bad. Yes, all good. So for anyone, you have joined us on Pour and Sip before, but I think I was away for that one.
It was a while ago. So it was definitely 2022, August 22, I think. I'm trying to think of what whiskey it was. Could have been Japan, could have been Taiwan, could have been India, could have been America.
Well, that's a good segue onto the point I was going to make. So talk to us a little bit about yourself and, in your current role. Obviously, you're looking after lots of different brands from all over the world, but talk to us how, how you got there and what you're doing.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I'm Nathan. I look after the advocacy portfolio program for Speciality Brands. If you've never heard of Speciality Brands before, don't worry about it. We're an importer and distributor. We used to be kind of a sister company to the Whiskey Exchange, but now we're a completely separate entity. But essentially, we look after about 30 really, really interesting, premium, family-owned, great quality brands. So Nika is what we're going to focus on today. We also look after Mictas from America. We look after Camu Cognac. We look after Tapatio Tequila. And my role is to kind of oversee the ambassador team. It's a real job, I promise. And to just kind of run around and spread the good word of delicious spirits, essentially.
Awesome. Was it Mictas then that I think we spoke?
Mictas. Yeah. Yes, I think so. I think we did the sour mash, maybe.
Yes, that's now actually starting to ring a bell. Maybe I was there. We've done so many of these. I know all our regular pour and sippers can remember. But there are some who will absolutely remember this. So I put that to everyone if anyone can, because they usually, some people have got mad memory and they really write this stuff down. But yeah, anyway, so tonight we're talking about Miyagikyo, which is part of the Nika brand. Talk to us a little bit, obviously, about the umbrella of Nika in general, and then Miyagikyo as a distillery. Where
sure. So Nika it was one of the first kind of companies that was set up to start distilling in Japan. So we won't do a full history of Japanese whiskey because we've got 15 minutes. So I'll kind of précis it down a little bit.
Yeah, that's a brief version. I usually say to guests, talk, let us all know, because you're here to talk to us about the history, but maybe a slight, that's quite a long story. So something a bit abbreviated about it.
We can shorten it a tiny bit. Yeah. So, it's whiskey got to Japan a little bit later than it got to places like America, South America, Africa, and places like that, purely because Japan was completely isolated through its self-imposed isolationist policy for about 200 years, up until the middle of the 1800s. So during that time, they had loads and loads of their own alcohols. So people might have tried sakes, shochus, awamoris, and that was what they produced. That's what they drank. They didn't really make anything similar to a whiskey. So we fast forward to the middle of the 1800s. Whiskey eventually gets to the Japanese shores via America, and everything Western at that point was really, really cool to the Japanese. They saw it as something that they'd never had before, and it was seen as a kind of class symbol as well. If you could have a Western beverage, it was because you had a little bit more money, and it was just an aspirational thing. So the Japanese started trying to approximate whiskey production using their own spirits. They said, oh, it's a little bit brown. It's a little bit, it's got flavors like vanilla and cinnamon. So why don't we just add some tea into it, add some vanilla, add some cinnamon? And that's kind of how it started. And then it got a bit further down the line. They said, enough's enough. Let's try and figure out how this is properly made. So the guy that founded Nika, a guy called Masataka Taketsuru, if anyone's coming to Glasgow Whiskey Fest on Saturday and comes to me and pronounces that correctly, I'll give you a free dram.
There you go. So for all of our guests, like your Uncle Vanya, who is going, Nathan's spoken there. So a man of his words.
I might live to regret that one. We'll see. So Taketsuru, he gets sent by a company that's making shochu to Scotland to learn how to make whiskey. So he goes to Glasgow University. Nice little segue in there. studies organic chemistry, and then from there he goes up to Longmorn in Speyside and learns how to make that style of single malt. Goes to an old distillery called James Calder, where he used coffee stills to make grain whiskey. Very, very important style of whiskey back in the 1920s and 1910s, because grain was all the rage. That's what everyone was drinking, or blends were all the rage. After that, he goes across to Hazelburn with his new wife, Rita, who was from Kirkintilloch. And he spends 6 months in Hazelburn learning how to produce that kind of West Coast, rich, peaty, coastal style whiskey, but also learning how to blend. So he has this experience and all of the technical knowledge from Glasgow. He has the knowledge of that Speyside malt, has the knowledge of the grain, and then he goes to Hazelburn and learns all about this production. And from there, he learned how to blend. And this is kind of the key thing that makes Japanese whiskey a little bit different to the current Scottish and global market. We focus a lot on single malts in the West, and that's kind of the creme de la creme, the best of the best. Whereas in Japan, it's still really about blending. Blending is taking all of those component parts and layering them on top of each other to create something really elegant. So this is still the focus for Japanese whiskey in general. So Taketsuru goes back to Japan with Rita. No one wants to invest in a whiskey distillery because it's a lot of money you have to spend. It's not a next day investment where you get all your money back either. So eventually he finds someone that wants to invest, and that person is known as Shinjiro Tori. So if anyone's into the Suntory whiskies, you might have heard that name before. Suntory were the first whiskey company in Japan, set up in 1923. Taketsuru was their first master distiller. So you can't have Nikka without Suntory, and you can't have Suntory without Nikka. So I like to think we're all friends. Other people on the other side might not agree. So Taketsuru worked at Suntory for 10 years, and they had some disagreements about the style of whiskey. You know, Taketsuru wanted to make a Scottish style whiskey and just replicate Scotch, whereas Shinjiro Tori wanted to make something a bit lighter, a bit more fragrant, a bit more elegant. And so the two parted ways, and then Taketsuru set up his own venture, which was Nikka Whiskey, in 1934. So 1934 was Yoichi Distillery, way up on the north. That kind of West Coast Hazelburn style is what they produced there. And then the one that we've got in our glass at the moment is the Miyagikyo. And this was the second distillery that Taketsuru set up. And this was set up in 1969.
And was that set up to be different? It's like specifically different to the Yoichi, how we pronounce it.
Absolutely.
I would always said Yoichi, so there you go.
I mean, no one in Japan would criticize the way you say it. They'd just be very happy that you're giving it a go. So it's Yoichi and Miyagikyo. The reason that they have, and Suntory do this as well, the reason there's two different distilleries is that they can maximize the variation in the styles of whiskey they produce. So we mentioned about blends earlier and how important blending whiskeys were for the Scottish market and the global market. To have a blend, you need more than one style of whiskey, right? I mean, it would be pretty boring if you just had one spice in all of your food. So the more you have, the more complexity you can bring in. Now, unlike in Scotland, at this point, there's only two distilleries in Japan, and they're not swapping casks. They're not really big fans of each other. So the only way to get around that and increase the variation and complexity of the whiskeys was to produce as many different styles as you could. So this is one of the key things, even with the single malt Miyagikyo here. In Scotland, we tend to have distilleries that produce a house style. So there are exceptions, but something like Glenfiddich, it'll always have that Glenfiddich character to it. Talisker will always have the Talisker. Lindores Abbey will have Lindores Abbey. And from that, you can build your variance and your variation on how long it's in the cask and what type of cask you have. And then you can blend with 150 other distilleries. Whereas in Japan, they traded different yeast strains. They used longer fermentations or shorter fermentations. They would change the peat level in the barley, and all of this creates variation in a different style of whiskey. So what we've got here is the Miyagikyo. So this is a light, fruity, almost kind of Speyside-esque style of whiskey. Lots of sherry cask in there, but it's not just one style. There's about 20 to 30 different styles of single malt that are blended together into this single malt here. So it's still a single malt because it's all made at one distillery, but there's all of those different styles that go in and they get layered on top. So I always think that with Miyagikyo, it's a very kind of summery autumnal whiskey. So you've got lots of that kind of baking spice. You've got some really nice, rich, dried fruit notes coming from those sherry casks. And there's just a hint of peat right at the back as well. And because we're using a lot of sherry cask and we're using a very, very light style of peat, you kind of see it as like almost like quite a resinous smoke that I get on this one. So on average, we're looking at about 10 to 12 years old on this. It's a non-age statement, so there could be some younger whiskey in there. Nika unfortunately ran out of stock of all their age statements. So if anyone does have any of the old age statements, either don't open them or open them and share them with me. You'll feel much better doing both of those, to be honest. So this one bottled at 45%, and it's just got that beautiful kind of elegant, almost, Highland Speyside style. There's a little bit of waxiness coming across in there.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's absolutely lovely. There's it's such a subtle kind of tobacco kind of smoke on the back. There's definitely nothing, and as I always find with Japanese whiskey, there's nothing that's like this dominating flavor that's popping out. It's much more subtle than that. It's not, it's wonderfully put together. Lots and lots of banana as well for me.
Yeah,
nose, to be honest. And there are lots of comments coming in now. And yeah, Peter Gilmore saying right banana on the nose. Malcolm Tucker is asking you if you were sporting a beard last time you were on Pour and Sip.
I was. I got rid of it.
See, I told you, people remember this stuff in this group. They really do. I told you the leaderboard for our guests that they have. They know what they're talking about. Yes, your Uncle Vanya is saying that the stash is new, I think, too. How new is the stash, Nathan?
I mean, the stash hasn't been removed. It's just the rest of the beard that got removed. It was, I think, September, just before the whiskey show. I was like, I need a little change. Let's see. I'm just modeling my inner Richard Patterson or something like that.
Okay. Your Uncle Vanya saying, loving the smoke on the nose. It's so gentle yet complicated and layered. There's a lot about your moustache.
Good stuff about them.
Yeah, about November, blah, blah, blah. Peter Gilmore's quite rich too. Anthony Mullins, yes, the smoke is subtle on the nose, hiding behind the fresh fruit smell. Malcolm Tucker knows I'm getting rose blossoms, touch of pine wood, and then the gentle whiff of smoke. Well, yeah.
Absolutely. I think the smoke is, for me, it's really interesting in this because when we think about smoky whiskey, it's almost impossible to not go straight to Islay, right? Mm-hmm. Where you just think smoky whiskey, right? I'm in Ardbeg, I'm in Lafroig, I'm in Lagavulin. And it's a completely different kind of smoke here, because you have that lightness in the distillation, those longer fermentations, lots of sherry cask, which you don't see so much in, your Ardbegs and your Lafroigs and such as much. Mm-hmm. So because you have all of that brightness and freshness on the front, the smoke's just at the back is like almost like a black pepper, like a seasoning that you'd add to your food. It's just adding a little extra depth, a little extra nuance. Mm-hmm. And I think that's some of the genius with blending. You can pull out all of those flavors, you can complement or you can contrast, and you have this absolutely amazing journey by layering all of these things on top of each other.
Yeah, I think the Japanese in general, they're doing such good work to obviously get rid of that kind of that weird, the kind of snobbery around blends and stuff like that. Over there is an absolute art form, blending, and something we have is just like put together by absolute geniuses in these blending rooms, and so I think that's helping, get rid of this kind of snobbery that we have about blends.
I mean, whiskey is it's very transient, right? So what's very popular today might not be popular tomorrow. We had, whether it was, lots and lots of really dark sherry casks for the last couple of years. Maybe it's coming into more of like a refill oak character now. People are looking more for the floral side of it. In Japan, they just want to make really good whiskey. And I think the way that they make it, it's just always based on that very traditional style of blending. And it's very similar to how we cook food. If we're making a curry or something, you layer those spices on top of each other. You're not trying to throw too much chili at it. You're trying to balance that with saltiness and sweetness and all of this kind of thing. So they take a lot of that sort of inspiration from the culinary world as well, I think. And it's just about having that beautiful interplay with all of those flavors.
Sure. I'm now salivating at the bit to have a sip of this after all these tasting notes. So cheers, everybody.
Kampai.
Last night of the first round. Yeah, I mean, for me, the thing I wrote is the one was the kind of ginger note for me that's there, and the sherry cask is really balanced, but wonderful. The kind of baking spices kind of notes. But it's kind of like tobacco leaf kind of cigar kind of vibe that's going on. Definitely not that. And I know people have been focusing on the peat here, this gentle smoke that people have been talking about. But to me, it's not like an air kind of, there's no medicinal peat in there for me.
No, not at all.
It's no Islay. It's like a kind of Highlandy kind of heathery kind of peat. Maybe.
Yeah, it's a very like kind of Highland Park-esque note. It's just very beautiful kind of like heather honey. It's got a little bit of that resinous smoke in there as well. And I love the texture on this whiskey too. when we compare it to something like Yoichi, which is much more robust and much more oily, this is a more modern distillery. So they've got much taller stills. They're using indirect steam. So it's a much slower distillation, increasing that reflux, lots of copper contact. And you have this, it's almost like fireworks going off in your mouth. It just jumps off the palate and starts going all over the different parts of your mouth. And you just have so much flavor in every sip and every kind of inhalation. It's a fantastically well-made whiskey. I adore this.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually the first time I've tried this. Jim Glancy is actually saying what I was about to say about that finish going on forever. Lovely stuff. And it's absolutely still lingering there. It's absolutely wonderful. Ali C, banana foam, sweets on the nose, buttery, ginger, burnt sugar, ginger nut biscuits, very slight, gentle smoke, very gentle and balanced whiskey. Absolutely. Balanced is definitely something you would say about this whiskey. Steve Cooper, banana, caramelized sugar, and that gentle smoke. Anthony Mullins, again, the smoke is so subtle on the taste. The spices are there, but nothing is overpowering. A very easy drinking autumn dram, which is perfect for a day like this. Jim Glancy, the finish goes on forever. Lovely stuff. You were mentioning about this, obviously, it's worth mentioning that, you know, this is a non-age statement for Miyagikyo, and those stocks have kind of run out. What is the future beholding for that? Is that something you expect that we will see in how long, that we might see age statements put on these?
It's a really interesting question. And I think whenever we speak to the brands directly in Japan, they're like, yeah, it's coming. We're like, any timelines? So earlier this year, we released the Yoichi 10 again. So that was April 23. So yeah, about 10 months ago. And then there's another batch of that coming in specifically for retailers, coming, I think, in the next sort of 2 weeks or so. So that was Yoichi. They kind of hit their stride a bit earlier than Miyagikyo. There is the plan to bring back Miyagikyo 10 as well. I'm not sure if we'll get to 15 and 20 like the previous releases, but who knows? I mean, it's like I said, whiskey is kind of, it goes on this sort of up and down trajectory all the time. Maybe we might lose all popularity of whiskey globally again, and then we've got all of these stocks to reuse in 20 years. But for now, I know they're definitely looking at the 10-year-old releases, and then we'll have to just wait and see what the future holds for that. Fingers crossed. I'd love a 25-year-old single cask Miyagikyo, but I don't think I could afford it.
Literally. I was about to say, so would I, but I don't think any normal human is going to be able to afford that particular brand. But we had discussed a while ago about, you know, the kind of the regulations that have been kind of introduced, which was probably about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Now, for Japanese whiskey, where do you see like that's going to affect the future? And what do you see as the future of Japanese whiskey? Because it has had a boom and people are so interested in Japanese whiskey. Where do you see it going?
So I think with the regulation, so April 2024, it will have been 3 years since the regulation sort of the grace period finishes. So everyone that's signed up to that, the agreement, which is all of the best whiskey producers in Japan, plus all the sake and shochu producers as well, it's their guarantee that it is of a quality and a standard and of a style that people are expecting.
Yeah.
Regulation can only be good for an industry, especially a fledgling industry. It sounds weird to say fledgling, but 100 years compared to 700 years of Scotch, this is still relatively new, you know? So I think regulation that focuses purely on quality and laws and rules can only be a good thing, and it can only stop people coming in and just trying to take a little piece of the pie, but not really adding anything. So I think the future of Japanese whiskey is really bright. You know, you've got some new distilleries that are coming out. You've got more, people are a lot more open to trying it now as well. I mean, when I first started working on Japanese whiskey 10 years ago, it was almost like, ooh, I didn't know they made whiskey in Japan. And now it's like, you've got Japanese whiskey, give it to me. Let's drink more of it.
And also now it's become more affordable, obviously, with the introduction of, you know, age statement whiskies like this one we're drinking, and like how, you know, Hibiki with the harmony and things like that. It's become more affordable to just try Japanese whiskey than it was when it started its boom recently, and it was like pretty much unaffordable to try anything.
Absolutely. And there's an amazing website. If anyone's got a bit of time, it's called Time Hop. So it takes an archive shot of, just use the Whiskey Exchange as an example, or Master of Malt as an example. Go back to 2005, 2006, and have a little look at what Japanese whiskey cost back then compared to what it costs now. It's a bit of an experience. You know, single cask Karuizawa, 150 quid a bottle compared to £30,000 now. So it's come a long way, Japanese whiskey. But I think because of the knowledge that's there, it means that there's more demand for consistent quality as well. So before it was single cask here, small blend there. Now it's about producing as very similar to in Scotland, where you need to produce it for a global market, and it's got to be consistent.
Yeah.
So it means that there's more attention to detail, if possible, it's even more than there was. But also it's opening up new doors for younger styles of whiskey, for more grain-led whiskies, even pure single grain whiskies, which are doing so well and are such a different style to what we find elsewhere in the world.
Absolutely. Well, Nathan, it's been wonderful talking to you about this. That's an absolutely beautiful dram. A lot of people have been saying the same thing. It seems that Malcolm Tuck again with the palate saying the heat of ginger, spice of cloves and cinnamon, which comes from the sherry, and cigarettes and ginger returns. These are kind of the kinds of notes that we could get in ginger, banana and sherry spices, and that little bit of cigar box kind of tobacco leaf as well. So it's wonderful stuff. Absolutely love that, and a great way to start our evening. And thank you. If you want to stick around to the end, please do.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much, Nathan. Cheers. Well, that was a wonderful way to start this evening. Thank you, everyone, for your tasting notes. I absolutely loved that. But we will be hearing from Nathan later. So we are going now, and I have to remember this because I literally just forgot it. I think we're going to Murray, and we're going to be talking about, he's nodding his head like he remembers, and I don't. And we'll be talking all things Lindores Abbey. So Murray, welcome. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Whereabouts are we speaking to you from?
I am sitting in Portobello, just outside Edinburgh, so the sort of seaside area of Edinburgh. So tonight, so it's okay weather today. It's been pretty rough of recent, but it's not too bad out there tonight. Cold though, cold.
Colds, yeah, but proper cold for you guys now. Or is it kind of, for us, it's starting to get cold, but for me, cold is different to what it is for you guys.
Well, I had to scrape the car this morning, so
okay, we're nowhere near that stage yet.
Yeah.
that's when you know it's turned. Awesome. So first, as just talk to us a little bit about yourself and how you kind of got into this role that you're currently in and working for this distillery.
Sure. So my name's Murray. I'm the UK sales manager and brand ambassador with Lindores Abbey Distillery. Where being a small independent distillery, you wear quite a few hats. So you could be selling whiskey in London one day, and the following day you can be back up pouring pints at the distillery. So it's you have to muck in and do a little bit of everything when you work with a small brand. I've been with Lindores now for about 5.5 years. So right from close to the very start, actually, from when we first started up, I got involved through. I used to have a small independent little events, like bar and events company. We used to do like weddings, festivals, things like that. And I grew up in Fife, where the distillery is, as did my business partner at the time, Andrew Lenny. He now works with White Mackay. He looks after like Jura and things. So Andrew grew up in Newborough, and we kind of knew the distillery was being built, and we heard there was some exciting things going on. So to be a little bit sort of sneaky, we offered our services to go and do a little cocktail night for the staff there, so they would start giving us some of their spirits before anybody else had access to it. And from that, we built up a really good relationship with Drew and Helen, the owners of Lindores, and they recognized that we were really passionate about what was going on at the distillery, and it was very organic from there. It was passionate people recognizing passionate people, and they invited Andrew and myself to come on board as the kind of first ambassadors with Lindores. And 5.5 years later, I have the pleasure of still working with Lindores and have launched the first whiskey with them a couple of years back now, and we now have a beautiful little selection of single malt whiskies out in the world, and just kind of wowing the world with what Lindores Abbey is doing just now. So
wonderful stuff. Thank you for that. So talk to us a little bit about Lindores Abbey, because it's got quite a long whiskey history. So I think you should talk to us a little bit about that and how the distillery came to be.
Yeah, sure thing. So I mean, I could talk the hind legs off it for days. Anyway, there's literally centuries of history at Lindores and really, really exciting stuff. So after this, I do recommend indulging in a little bit about the kind of vast history of the Abbey itself. So where we are, we're in a little village called Newborough in Fife, just on the south banks of the River Tay, so just outside of Perth, about sort of 15-20 minute drive from Perth. So in geography terms, it's about an hour north of Edinburgh as well. So you're kind of looking over the Tay towards Dundee on the right, and you've got Perth on the left. We are built in amongst the ruins of an old 12th century abbey, which is Lindores Abbey in Newborough. The abbey itself was built all the way back in 1191 by a group of monks who came across from a small town called Tiron in France, just outside of Paris. They were getting a little bit bored with the lackadaisy attitudes of them over there, so they wanted to up sticks and come over and kind of put a new strictness to their order in the UK. So they established some abbeys like Lindores. We have our sister abbeys of Ardmore and of Kelso, and the mother abbey of Tiron actually still exists today. But in the 16th century in Scotland, we went through what's called the Reformation period. So the country was changing its spiritual allegiances at the time, to put it politely as possible. And with that, a lot of abbeys and churches were destroyed. Lindores being a really large, powerful abbey in the day, it was destroyed twice just to really make sure. So you had big name in history of John Knox came from Dundee with his friends and burnt it down, destroyed it a couple of times to really make sure. So with that, it lost a lot of its history, its identity. And what remains of the abbey today is just a beautiful collection of stone walls, archways, kind of very much lost to history, lost to nature. What you have in your head is a fairy tale-like structure that you might stumble across in a storybook. And just became like the back garden to the farmhouse of Lindores Abbey Farm, which has been in the Mackenzie Smith family since 1913. And we kind of jumped forward again a little bit to the year 2000. Somebody came visiting the Abbey ruins one day at the farmhouse and asked if they could look around, which was a really odd occasion, occurrence to happen. And the family kind of watched this gentleman from the window as he took a few pictures and wrote some notes, and they swear they saw him listening to the rocks at one point and just thought he was a bit of a oddball historian, had a wee thing going on, and he just left and didn't say anything else. But about 6 months later, the family got a beautiful hardback book delivered to the house entitled Scotland and Its Whiskies, and by the late great whiskey writer Michael Jackson. So not moonwalking Michael Jackson, but the beer hunter, or the whiskey hunter as he was known. And it was Jackson who has visited the Abbey that day. And he had a note in the flyleaf of the book saying, "Thank you for letting me walk around your back garden." Turn to page 127 and onwards. And as the family opened the book at that page, they saw a familiar picture of the back garden of the Abbey ruins. And at the top it said, "For the whiskey lover, it is a pilgrimage." And the family were a bit perplexed as this gentleman had come to their back garden and is now writing about them in a whiskey book. But as they read that further on, Jackson was explaining what had been a fairly recent discovery at the time, where someone had been translating old tax records of the kings, known as the Exchequer's Rolls, held in a museum in Edinburgh. They found a very important entry from the year 1494, which was King James IV of Scotland commissioning Friar John Corr, who is very firmly to be believed of Lindores Abbey, commissioning him to make aquavitae for the king. So it read, "To Brother John Corr, 8 balls of malt, wherewith to make aquavitae for the king." Aquavitae being the Latin for water of life, which we later started calling Ushkabe or Ushkaba in Gaelic and Gaelic. Later that was shortened just to Ushki, and Ushki eventually became pronounced as whiskey. So whiskey means water of life. Its earliest name being aquavitae in Latin, and for all of our poems and songs and stories and history books and folklore or cave drawings, anything at all, the earliest reference to any form of distillation in Scotland and what we now call whiskey is this tax record associated with Lindores Abbey in 1494. So this forgotten about little collection of stone walls and archways had a new light shone upon it for whiskey lovers the world over as what is now referred to as the spiritual home of Scotch whiskey. And this ignited a kind of dream of Drew Mackenzie Smith to one day maybe bring back distilling to this really important location. That dream took about 20 years to come into reality. And we now have a beautiful single malt whiskey facility built in amongst the ruins of the old abbey. The build was completed back in 2017. And we first started distilling again in December of 2017 for the first time on record in about 523 years or something. So it's been a long time coming home to Lindores, and we now have some beautiful single malt whiskey to share with the world.
I gotta say, it's an absolutely fascinating story, and it's interesting hearing that, and I'm sure all the pouring sippers think that's a really interesting story. Yeah, we always have great history. pour it, and every distillery's got their thing. But I think that's just a really, really fascinating story to tell, and I'm sure you guys will think that as well. And talking of that, so with all this history, set up the distillery, but what did they want the house style of this to be? What did they want this whiskey to be when it first started?
Well, Drew and Helen had never run a distillery before. They had worked in little snippets of whiskey. They'd both worked for Glenmorangie and things in the past, but they'd never been distilling. They were never stills people. Drew was a chef, and Helen had a career in classic cars, and then she worked front of house things, running sort of hospitality aspect of Glenmorangie. And so they needed to employ the right people. So they were friends with the late great Dr. Jim Swan. So Jim Swan was offering a lot of advice as a friendly capacity in the early days, but eventually it was kind of like, right, if I'm going to be doing this, I need to be brought on as an actual consultant. So he came on as the lead consultant on the build of Lindores, and gave Drew and Helen two choices, which was Lindores with the history and the story behind it. Could be a Loch Ness Monster or a Greyfriars Bobby kind of Mickey Mouse style distillery, which is all about the story. You could make a very cheap style whiskey that was there to kind of welcome in American tourists to come and tick the box of visiting the spiritual home, and then send them on their way and perhaps never buy a bottle again. Or it was option B, whereas to not cut any corners at all, if anything, add as many extra corners on as possible, to perhaps one day be recognized as making the best spirit in Scotland. Luckily and excitingly, they went for option B. And the build of the distillery was then built in a certain way to be able to produce a style of spirit that would be fantastic for aging over long periods of time, that would also be exceptional at a young age, at 3, at 4, at 5 years old, would hopefully change a little bit of a benchmark of what young whiskey could be. Mm-hmm. So with that in mind, we get all of our barley from Fife. It's all been from the local area. And from the last 2.5 years now, we've been getting all of our barley from our 2 neighbouring farms within 3 miles of Lindores. We have a borehole at the back of the distillery for a local water source. We have old Douglas fir style like wooden washbacks. We have really, really long fermentation. So one of the highest in the country, I think, it's up to 119 hours for the fermentation process. So really long up there. We have an exciting spirits still setup. So we have one wash still called Dodo, which is named after Drew's mum, who was Dorothy. And they have 2 smaller sister spirit stills set up, which is G and Poppy, after Drew and Helen's daughters. And the 2 stills, it might look like it was going to be triple distillation, but it's just double distillation. It's fed by the same low wines and faints tank underneath, and it's run at the same time, but very, very gentle style distillation. And what the 2 working together allows us to do is have extra copper contact, like double copper contact almost. And still, if you're wanting lots of copper contact, you might want to have like an inclining line arm, like the sort of spout coming off the still. But we can still have a fairly steepish declining line arm. But what that allows us to do is have a spirit that is very light and fruity, very like sweet fruit forward in flavor, but can still have a nice, heavy, thick, creamy mouthfeel. So it's a very intelligent new make spirit. And actually in 2020 and 21, it was awarded from the World Whisky Awards as the best quality new make in Scotland at the time. So before we'd even started releasing it as whiskey, the spirit itself was being classed as exceptional. And now we are kind of going into the maturation with it here. So
you have to go to the distillery to get your hands on the new make.
Yeah, well, we sell it. It is available in like 200ml bottles. I don't know if the world's quite there for sort of sessioning like large full bottles of new make. Ours, I have to say, it is a fantastic product. Even at 63.5%, it's delicious to drink. It's really good for making longer serves and cocktails and things as well. And I think that new make will be something that's much more accepted as a normal drink in the years to come. There seems to be a real sort of resurgence in people releasing their new make and showing it off to the world. So, but then we move into the maturation of what we're doing with our new make. And thanks to the relationship from Dr. Jim Swan with his incredible contacts around the world, and his real skills in maturation is probably his greatest gift that he left the world, I think, among many. We can fill this incredible spirit into some of the best maturation vessels that the world has to offer, with this result of young whiskey, but being a real pleasure to drink at 3, at 4, at 5 years old.
Absolutely. So that brings us on to what we're drinking tonight. So go through it.
Yeah, sure. So I came on the show, actually. It was very odd. We discussed this at the start, the same show as Nathan last year in August. So I was actually on the same one there. And what we were doing there was a single cask with you guys, which was just bourbon, which is one of the components of our core classic style here. So this is the one that we've got tonight is our core, our flagship style whiskey from Lindores. This is what we call our MCDXCIV.
Is everyone going to remember that? Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's a good one to be able to say at the end of the night. You know, if you can still see it,
What's your favourite of the night? The M's, Lindores Abbey.
So it's Roman numerals for 1494, just bringing us back to that kind of story of the origins of Scottish distilling. This one's at 46% ABV. It's a combination of our 3 core cask types that we use at Lindores, which is first fill bourbon casks. So they're all first fill casks that we're using for this. So bourbon, we have STR red wine barriques from,
which you mentioned is very much a Jim Swan thing. If you want to talk to everyone about STR casks and what they kind of are as well, that would be quite helpful. Yeah,
sure. So the 3 casks, we've got bourbon, we've got the STR red wine barriques, and all are also sherry. So STR stands for shaved, toasted, and recharred. It's people have been rejuvenating cask types for a long, long time, but this particular STR sort of word, if you've not heard it before, I guarantee you won't be doing many, like it'll pop up as a buzzword in lots of whiskey tastings going forward now. It's a way of kind of taking an older style cask that's maybe not got as much to give anymore, shaving back the inner layer of the cask, exposing like fresher wood, essentially. So it's almost like, it's not quite cheating the system. It's just a clever way of upcycling the cask to give you the effects of almost like using virgin oak, which is, you can't really speed up maturation, but virgin oak casks will give you a much quicker style of feel or effect of maturation. And that's what these STRs are good for. So you're using them more for young distilleries like Lindores, where to give you an extra punch of maturity as a blending tool for a core style. Beautiful by themselves, but they're fantastic for just giving an extra bit of well-roundedness to your core style. So it brings lots to the table there. So it's a little bit about the red wine influence, but with that sort of shaved back with a heavy char to really blister that wood, it's exposing a lot of that sort of younger, fresher oak there. It's going to give you those much kind of deeper, spicier kind of feel to the overall product. But balance that with the bourbon and the Oloroso sherry. It's an exceptionally well-rounded little dram, this one. And it's so soft, it's so silky. It's really kind of sweet fruit forward, without encouraging any irresponsible drinking, I must say. Put those in the brackets there first. I would describe this one as a little bit of a session dram. So there's certain whiskies that kind of evoke the feelings of having it late at night or after dinner, and you might have a kind of nightcap or an after dinner drink, and it kind of 1 or 2 drams goes back in the cabinet. For me, this one is great for a Saturday, Sunday afternoon, like a real easy drinker. It's really approachable, got a lovely sociable feel to it, and it's a kind of, again, not encouraging irresponsible drinking in any way, but a group of friends around, a few drinks, you can kind of look away and look back, and you've put a serious dent in this bottle without thinking about it. It's a lovely kind of, it pours very well, and it's like very, very approachable. It's not got anything scary going on in it at all. So it's just lovely mouthfeel, lovely flavors, and just a nice little pleasure dram, I think.
Oh, I'm absolutely salivated at that. I mean, the nose is absolutely wonderful. There's like a kind of like a figgy note there, lots of vanilla as well for me. I don't know if anyone's ever said Caramac bars, but that's something I'm getting on here. And the notes coming through, your Uncle Van, firstly saying Portobello. Musselburgh says
Musselburgh. Yeah, so Musselburgh is just along the road. So yeah, a couple of miles from Musselburgh. Between Musselburgh and Edinburgh is where I am right now.
That looks very foreign to me, that word. So I have no idea what he was talking about. Ali C, I also had to scrape the car this morning. Winter arrives quickly in Edinburgh. Krista, everyone talking about the weather. Ali C, -2 last night. Whiskey weather. Anyway, Anthony Mullins. Ooh, Getting a caramelized sticky toffee on the nose there. Chris Dagnan, yes, caramel toffee on the nose. Malcolm Tucker, nose, fresh orchard fruit and vanilla ice cream. Yes, to the vanilla note.
That's perfect, that one, I think. Orchard
Yeah.
fruits, vanilla ice cream, I think is right on the money for me for that. Kind of toffee apples and vanilla ice cream is
Toffee apples would be good for our Halloween extravaganza.
Absolutely. I wouldn't mind going bobbing for whiskey. That's not too bad to do.
Yeah. All right. Should we have a sip of this one?
Yeah, let's do it.
Thank you. Cheers, everyone.
Slange.
Yeah. Let the session begin.
Again, I must reinforce that I'm not encouraging anybody to jump on an irresponsible drinking session, but yes,
it would be remiss of me to say on our box, which is called Pour and Sip. That is absolutely what we do.
Yeah.
Pour and sip. We pour and sip. But yes, this is definitely one of those ones you could absolutely sit there with this one for a while of an evening with a group of friends. And it's not that it's not complex, it is complex, and it's just really kind of approachable.
I think so, yeah.
Vanilla toffee notes as well, but in a wonderful way. Peter Gilmore here saying pear skins to the nose. Also, great story, thank you very much. And Anthony Mullins saying great story, love Scottish history. Malcolm Tucker palate, this fills the mouth. There's more vanilla, absolutely. There's that wonderful mouthfeel, which is something we don't often talk about when we first go to our tasting notes. Everyone kind of forgets about mouthfeel, but this has this wonderful creamy vanilla kind of.
Yeah, I think the mouthfeel is a real quintessential note for Lindores, and it's been purposely done with that, like the way that we're making it. So right from lots of people want to, maybe their new make's not there to kind of to show off, and it's maybe there for developing over a longer period of time. But at Lindores, we want that character to kind of shine through. Then we want, like kind of Nathan was mentioning before about certain distilleries, we want people to recognise every whiskey we do as a Lindores product, and I think that mouthfeel really brings it home. As you know, you're drinking Lindores when you've got that. It's not oily, but it's more kind of creamy.
Yeah, creamy vanilla, absolutely. And it's that thing of, like you said, it's very important to have that as, like, you know, especially as a new distillery, to go, okay, I'm definitely drinking that from that product, mixed in with all these other new distilleries that go, no, that's definitely Lindores. So that's really good to see. Yeah. Anthony Mullins is getting vanilla in abundance, but smooth and creamy. Then a subtle pepper finish. Ali C, toffee apple on the nose. Kids had one on bonfire night. So there we go. That seems to be a common. I think palate, I'm getting brown sugar, vanilla, candied orange peel. Werther's original. That's absolutely there with that kind of hard candy toffee note as well. And chocolate hobnobs. Excellent whiskey.
That's good, actually. Yeah, that's a good one.
Your Uncle Vanya agree on the initial spicy punch, but I was a bit greedy with my raclette earlier. Burnt my tongue. So, well, wow, these are middle-class issues that we have going on. Burnt my tongue on my raclette, so I can't try my whiskey properly.
That is good.
Love that. Peter Gilmore, yeah, I get the pepper finish now. Your Uncle Vanya, lovely dram, especially for, well, that I didn't know, because I haven't even seen the bottle for this one as in the pricing, but £40 in the Pour and Sip members store.
Perfect. Well, yeah. Again, that's an incredible price point for you guys there, I think, and I think it's worth mentioning as well. I think this one is it is non-chill filtered, no added colouring to this one, and the shock factor for many is that like the age of this one is about 3.5 to 4 years old. So you know, you take that back 5 years or 10 years at whiskey events, and a lot of people were just really turning their nose up at the thought of that, and perhaps rightfully so in the past, like for something that young may have been very harsh and aggressive, whereas this is a super delicate, like lovely little easy drinker and approachable to a wide range of people. And for a 3.5 to 4 year old whiskey, I think it just it really shows off the quality of the spirit itself and the casks we're using. So
we have had lots of young whiskey imports, and everyone who's been with us, you know, since the start has had their opinions on that changed quite dramatically about young whiskey, you know, or whiskey having to be of a certain age. But it would be interesting what I mean, because you don't obviously, there is plans to have an age statement coming soon, or is it?
Well, we're come the 20th of December, we're about to turn 6 years old as a distillery. So, you know, we will probably have age statements in the future. But we are very young. We're a young distillery with young whiskey in the warehouse. We don't have that luxury as such of being a young distillery, but maybe having an old warehouse full of older stock that we can kind of pull little bits from here and like make our core style from that, and then be running for a couple of years. But then we have a 10-year-old on the market. Everything we're doing is very. People ask, are we doing anything experimental? And everything we're doing is experimental because it's the first time we've done anything. So, but we're really, I think we've really found our feet with the style of whiskey we're trying to make, and we're really kind of hitting that mark, I think. And I think that when we, like ourselves and some other young distilleries coming out of the lowlands, we are in the lowlands by just 3 meters, which is a nice quirky little fact for Lindores. If we were on the other side of the street, we'd be a highland distillery, but we're just operating 3 meters into the lowlands. And the lowlands is a really exciting little area at the minute. It's almost like a little punk rock area for whiskey. There's a bit of a renaissance of like lowland whiskey coming out, and a lot of it is to do with producing a really high quality new make. So for that younger style whiskey. So perhaps when we get to 10, 12 years old, the benchmark for a 10 or 12-year-old whiskey might be completely different than what it was 10 years ago. So
yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how this does in the aging process as well.
Absolutely.
Years of maturation, how it changes everything you're talking about in terms of the house style and the mouthfeel and all of these kind of things, and that will be interesting to see. Lots more notes coming in. Chris Dagnan, Caramac are being discontinued. Boo Nestle. Chris Dagnan also saying cream soda maybe. Anthony Mullins. My drams don't appear to be lasting until the end of the guest speaking tonight. Well, there you go. That's your inclination there to buy a bottle of this one at £40 already. A steal. Ali C says he's already bought one.
Cheers. Well, slange that.
Yeah, slange to that. So yeah, you kind of briefly mentioned about it, but I'll ask again just because it's a nice way to wrap up the conversation. But where do you see, what is in the pipeline? Have you got anything experimental coming up? But in general, what is it you see happening in the future, in the next couple of years for Lindores?
Well, we will. We are just kind of new to the market, and we're. I keep trying to. I maybe keep saying it too many times, but I'm just reinforcing. We are a small independent brand. When we talk about output of the distillery, it's lots of people might talk about a few million liters of pure alcohol a year, or 2 or 4. Like we're 150,000 liters of pure alcohol a year, so we're really small. We're not a garden shed, but we're a small distillery. So with that, we have to kind of grow within our means, really, and we're expanding into the world, and people are falling in love with Lindores every day. But yeah, we will be going for, we probably will. We're aging our spirit all the time. We're not releasing everything we've got. Before I worked with Lindores, I didn't realize how important the first couple of years of distilling is, because the first 2 years or 3 years of your distilling, that will be your first 10, your first 12, your first 18, your first 21. And if you start releasing all your stock as it gets older and older, and your whiskey is becoming more popular, and everybody wants the 6-year-old and everybody wants the 7-year-old now, and you'll never reach 10, or you'll never reach 12 or 18. So it's a real calculated game by our distillery manager, Gary Haggart, as to what he can release to us to sell. But yeah, we have about 70 plus different styles of casks that we're filled into, and these are different types of casks completely. Whereas I mentioned the core casks of being the bourbon, the STR red wine, and the Oloroso, but there's a huge variety of different casks we've got aging, and we've done some little market exclusives, and we do the distillery exclusive as well. But there's scope for some really exciting releases coming out from Lindores in the future as well. So
there we go. That sounds all really exciting, and as I can see from the comments that everyone absolutely loves this one. So thank you very much, Murray, for talking us through this. And we will see you at the end if you want to stick around. Cheers.
Absolutely. Slange. Cheers, guys.
See you later. Thanks, Murray. Right. Well, this is absolutely flying by. I've just absolutely noticed the time. So we should keep moving on. So, yeah, just looking at some more of your comments there. But we are going to invite Paul onto the screen, and he's going to be talking to us all things about Brave New Spirits and this Ardmore. How are you, Paul?
Evening, yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Thanks for having us.
You're very welcome. Whereabouts are we speaking to you from?
I'm the only one that's never been on Pour and Sip before, so it's nice to be.
There you go. The Pour and Sip virgin.
Yeah.
As we speak.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you so much for the invite. I often wonder how we got involved in this, but and good to see so many familiar. I can't see the messages, but I'm hearing the questions coming in from so many people that I know. So
okay, that's great. That's great to hear. Where about are we talking to you from?
I'm in my spare room in my house in Glasgow at the moment. So I live not far from the city centre, conveniently halfway between the city centre and our warehouse. So
awesome. Were you scraping the car this morning as well?
No, actually, not for frost, but then it's not far away. I know exactly what Murray. If he's more coastal than we are, so
yeah, okay.
It's in the post, shall we say?
Okay, yeah, sure. Well, as this is your first pour and sip, and your Uncle Vanya's already saying brave new spirits, whoop whoop. Let's as it's great to have you. This is your first, but let's talk a bit about yourself and let everybody know who you are.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Paul Dempsey. I'm the sales and marketing director for Brave New Spirits. We are a 3-year-old independent bottler that was formed by two folk that had been trading casks with each other for a number of years. We all came from whiskey industry backgrounds. I joined about 1.5 years ago. Prior to that, I was with the Speyside Distillery for about 8 years. And before that, I was a distributor. So working with various different spirits brands, everything from cocktail bars to the first whiskey I ever worked with was Arran back in the early noughties. And then I was the distributor in the UK for Bruichladdich for a couple of years until they changed owners. So started working with whiskey about 2007 and moved through distilleries and now to independent bottlers. So now I have to try and memorize lots of stuff about many distilleries rather than just one. It can be a lot of fun experimenting. So if I make any mistakes, please pick me up on them. So
well, I mean, the experimentation thing must be really interesting working with an independent bottler such as Brave New Spirits and with the stuff that you're doing. It must be very exciting. But talk to us about Brave New Spirits first, because we're not, we've not had anything from you guys here, and I'm sure lots of people are interested in what it's all about.
Well, Brave New Spirits, like I say, they're now we celebrated our 3rd anniversary about 2 months ago. We own our own bonded warehouse and bottling hall now. We're up to 25 staff, and there is no master blender. We choose everything we bottle by group decision. So if there's 4 or 5 people in the office, we'll get together and fight over it. We design the labels in-house. We design the brands. Some of the brands that people will be familiar with in the UK include the stuff on the banners behind me. So we have a small batch range called Whiskey of Voodoo, which, we named that after the kind of, imagine somebody with a big cauldron mixing whiskies together. We have a couple of different ranges of single casks, of which tonight's one came from a range that we call Cask Noir. Essentially, we used that name to reference those kind of complex old movie that you used to see in the 50s and 60s, like the old Hitchcock thrillers. So the labels all look like, or are supposed to look like, old movie posters. I don't know if you can see.
Pull that back. I know. So yeah.
So you can see where the tasting notes would be, where the stars of the film are. Down at the bottom, you've got the production notes for the casks, hiding where you would get the production notes in the movie, and where it tells you how old you got to be to see the film is actually your age statement for the whiskey. So
luckily, it's not 10 euro, is it?
No,
it's great. I didn't have this.
It is 18 to drink, but it's a 9-year-old whiskey. So, so we have quite a decent stock of casks. We, like some independent bottlers, we buy casks on the open market that we think are worth bottling. We also try and buy as many casks as we can where we do a lot of the aging ourselves. Like I say, there was a merger of different cask collections when the company was formed. So a lot of the casks in our warehouse have been owned by the owners for longer than the company exists. But we're lucky enough to be able to buy new make from a lot of places. And then we can decide cask styles from day one. The Cask Noir series, it's mainly, a lot of them are kind of unusual casks, wine finishes, rum, anything like that. but if we won't automatically go to put stuff in funky casks if we think it's good enough as it is. We've done some amazing releases with just bourbon and sherry casks.
Yeah.
Working with as many distilleries as we can. Obviously, some distilleries are a lot harder to come by than others when you're an indie bottler. But what we want to try and do is put whiskey out that, you know, is different from what you would see from the distillery where the whiskey was distilled.
Yeah.
So, you know, if it's a distillery that only does standard strength, we will do cask strength. If it only ever releases in sherry cask, we'll have bourbon or we'll have a wine cask finish. It would be pretty boring if we only referenced the same releases as the distilleries themselves. And hopefully that is creating a lot of interest. We've picked up quite a few great reviews and awards this last year. So folk are starting to realize that we're more and more of our whiskies are starting to get visible, which is great. So
is that the ethos, kind of like, you know, you're mentioning about like indie bottle? You don't just want to bottle, you know, another distillery's whiskey. You want to put your own stamp on it. You want to do interesting things with this whiskey.
Exactly. You know, there's so many different combinations, and especially for indie bottlers, certain distilleries are a lot easier to come by on the stock. So, I mean, if you look through our archive on the website already, you'll see that a lot of the distilleries are the big distilleries that are owned by the big producers, maybe ones that were feeding blenders originally.
Yeah.
But that means that, you know, if they've got a production capacity of several million litres a year, it sometimes means there's casks available for indie bottlers to get hold of. Mm-hmm. But we do want to, you know, the reason we have a warehouse, the reason we've got people out trying to buy casks in wineries and distilleries all over the world is because we want to be involved in the re-rack. We want to see what you can do to change, you know, the whiskey if it needs it. You know, we're all wine nuts. We like, none of us go on holiday and come back without finding contacts at wineries or you know, last time I was abroad it was rum distilleries. So if anybody's looking to sell empty casks, please give us a shout.
There you go. So talk to us. You talk about the cask Noir. Mm-hmm. What kind of stuff is in that range? Tonight we're trying the Ardmore, the 9-year-old. Eagle has landed. What's that in reference to?
Well, again, it's meant to be the labels. If we hide the distillery name, and we have to on some of them, because, you know, some distilleries won't let you name, but if you look at a distillery bottle of Ardmore, there's always an eagle on it. So when we're constructing the kind of movie title to name the whiskey, we will we'll try and find some kind of trivial link or some kind of cryptic link to the distillery. So far in the Cask Noir range, this is from the third batch. There's 2 Ardmores in that batch. Both of them mention eagles in the title, but we wanted it to look like a sort of Alfred Hitchcock, Frederick Forsyth style book cover. We've done, you know, if I grab something else.
Here's something I made earlier.
Yeah, we've got an Auchentoshan there, which is called Picnic in the Corner of the Field, because the Gaelic word for Auchentoshan, if you ever do the distillery tour there, they always tell you it's called, that Auchentoshan means corner of the field. So we'll reference that. We did a Cameron Bridge and we called it Take It to the Brig after the James Brown song. We released one. We've used Shakespeare quotes. We even put the name of somebody's twin town on the label where we weren't allowed to name the distillery on one of them. So, so anybody that went on the Wikipedia and discovered where the French town of Torcy was and what it was twinned with would twig where the distillery was. So.
What is it twinned with?
It's Girvan, I think so.
Okay.
It's one of those ones on the Ayrshire coast. So.
Okay.
So we have a lot of fun with that, and sometimes, you know, you can tell what day of the week it was when we, you know, if it's a really cryptic. We did a Macduff and we used a Shakespeare quote, and people thought, "My God, we're all Shakespearean," but we're not. It's just, you know. Other times we did a Glenmurray and we just made up a French name because we know that Glenmurray is owned by a French parent company, and we couldn't find anything else to say. So, so it's a lot of fun, a lot of fights. And you know, there's 20 staff and 25 of us in the office. 7 or 8 different nationalities. So everybody's bringing inspiration in from everywhere. So
do you all sit around the table, 20 of you coming up with these, or is it like something that's a few drinks and going, oh?
It's never been that big a tasting panel, but whoever's walking past the office and doesn't look busy will get hauled into the.
If I was working in this office, I'd just never look busy. I'd be like, crap, I'm not doing anything. I can constantly come to these tasting panels.
It's great. We discovered over lockdown, when I was at my previous place, the tasting notes that were coming in on these virtual tastings from people that were not professional whiskey folk were as good and sometimes better than the tasting notes you would get if you went to some of the industry big names.
We've had that comment often from guests on boards. Yeah. I mean, Colin Dunn actually famously had said to us, and he was like, I'm going to write some of these down, but because it was just like lots of our guests have been not surprised, but it's like, you know, they're just things you might not hear before because they're not on whiskey panels and stuff like that. So you don't
exactly.
And because whiskey is so kind of, I feel it can bring you back to memories of your childhood and stuff like that. You're just opening up to a wider kind of group of people, and just you're going to have people's childhood experiences to something coming. Oh, never thought of that. And that's absolutely great.
And I love seeing what, you know, at my last place, when we did the virtual tastings, when we all couldn't leave the house, we would send a bottle away at the end of the tasting for whoever gave us the best tasting note. But we also then issued a disclaimer to say that if you ever saw it turning up on one of our bottles in the future, you couldn't send us a bill for it. So, people didn't. I don't think folk realised just how good everybody's tasting notes can be if you ask people for their opinion. It's a fantastic way to taste whiskey. So
absolutely, and there's, as we always say here, there's no right or wrong answer. But let's go on to this whiskey because people are already talking a lot about this one. And actually, firstly, just that's a good one. Seacon Williams saying, "Love Ardmore." Reminds me of first visit to a new church where the lay minister said hi. And sorry, this is just
see, that's the kind of tasting notes that that's exactly it. We had somebody told us once that it reminded them of their first camping holiday in Blairgowrie somewhere, and you're like, well, that's great. None of us can reference that, but what a way to do a tasting note. So.
And that's also very good. Malcolm Tucker saying that Glenn Murray, did he not play for Brighton Hove Albion and Crystal Palace? But yes, that's very good. So a lot of people mentioned about this, about water, a little drop of water helping. But obviously this is bottled at 56.6%, so a lot stronger than anything that we've drunk tonight. But let's just talk about Ardmore in general, just first, and just say what we should get from an Ardmore. Where is Ardmore?
Well, Ardmore's it's a great distillery, but it's one of the few kind of Highland ones that's always produced peated whiskey. It was founded, I think it's been around for about 130 years now. It was founded by the son of William Teacher's son. So it was, immediately feeding Teacher's blended whiskey. And it's one of these high volume distilleries. I think it produces about 4 or 5 million litres a year. It's currently owned by Beam Suntory. So, if you imagine all the kind of blends, again, Teachers and some of the other big blends around the planet, it's probably more of us have probably tasted it than we realize.
Sure.
They do have a range of single malts that they do from the distillery. But this one is single cask. It's also been finished in a cask, a Rivesaltes wine cask, which is slightly unusual because that's a French fortified wine. So
yeah, and that's
down from the Pyrenean region. So it's a bit like their version of port, perhaps.
I don't think I've ever seen that before. I think maybe I tried a tomatin in that.
Could well be
in that wine barrique, but I don't think I've ever seen that.
I mean, Rivesaltes is a wine region that's it's in the Pyrenees, down near the Spanish border, so pretty close to, I think is Andalusia down there. Nearest big town is Perpignan, but they make Rivesaltes wine. They leave it outside in demijohns for like a year before they stick it in oak barrels. Wow. So you get this, and it's fortified. So like sherry, like port, like Madeira, you get these extra characteristics that possibly come from, stopping the wine fermenting all its sugar away.
Sure. And
so you get a very sweet wine result.
And this is spent not a full 9 years in these casks?
No, this will have been re-racked. It's pretty hard to find a distillery the size of Ardmore would probably not be filling Rivesalt's casks straight from the start.
Yeah.
So for the ones when you see our range, it'll say, we just say first fill Rivesalt's barrique there.
Yeah.
It will be, if I check the records, probably about an 18-month to 2-year finish.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. But you get that sweetness, and of course, with it being a peated distillery, but it's a Highland peated distillery, and just almost Speyside. This is in Aberdeenshire, so not too far from Dufton. So it's not Isle of Peat. It's probably peat from the Kincardineshire area, so it's compressed forest rather than compressed seaweed if they're using that peat. So that has a different effect on the spirit as well.
Sure. So we're getting those kind of heathery peat, much more woody kinds of peat, rather than this medicinal Teton peat kind of Isla.
Exactly. So there's less of the TCP in the iodine, and I don't know whether this is the Highland peat or whether this is the fortified wine effect, but there's a kind of herbal.
Yep, absolutely.
It's not menthol, but it's a kind of.
It's reminded me of something like a Ricola kind of sweets. If you've ever had those, they kind of.
Oh yes, yeah, the ones you get in foreign airports.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had those recently, but that's what it's reminding me of. It's very recent memory.
I mean, we've got our tasting notes on the front, hiding as the cask member. I don't know if you can see that, but we've got things like padron peppers and toasted marshmallows in there. The pepper one comes right to the end, but it is one barrel, so there is only 248 bottles. We leave it at the barrel strength, so don't be scared to put some water in there because it will sweeten it up a little bit. So
yeah, okay, let's have a little taste. That's absolutely wonderful. It's got those kinds of all the senses, the kind of the sweet, the smoky thing going on, a little bit. So it's just absolutely wonderful. Kind of, there's almost this Haribo sweet kind of note that's there at the start when you get that first in your mouth, and then it turns into this wonderful woody kind of smoke note. It's absolutely wonderful, I have to say. And it's powerful. It is powerful at 56%. It's not over powerful for me. I don't know if that's a palate thing. For me, I will add water to it, but it's not like overly powerful that it's like kind of not opening up for me and kind of adding these notes. I will with water, but yeah.
Well, I've got a little bit of water in mine, but again, when we're choosing the barrels to bottle, there are some whiskies that we wouldn't bottle at cask strength because but there's others where the flavors really carry and they play with the higher alcohol level. The finish on this one is still hanging around. There's a tiny little bit of tannin at the end, which gives it a little bit more structure.
Yeah.
And it's if you tasted this side by side with an Ardmore distillery bottling, you could see the family connection, but it's so much more unusual. And that's part of the reason we used an unusual wine cask on this one. Some of our other whiskies we leave in the distillery casks that we get them in. So
that must be so much fun in the session to be thinking of like what you're going to add from your stocks into this and what you're going to finish it in, and just having this kind of like carte blanche with these ideas and kind of not being.
It's a lot of fun, but it's whiskey can start a lot of arguments as well. But it's a fun argument. It's a fun argument to have. But it's kind of cool because a lot of whiskey distilleries have got the same parent companies as some wineries, and we all speak to cooperages all over the world now. But you can go to shows in Europe like Pro Wine, which has 2 spirits halls and about 15 wine halls, and you can go out and you can try all these kind of weird exotic wines and try and find out where these barrels are coming from. It's really hard to buy even now wine casks directly from wineries. So, but a lot of the cooperages now will always have a few, but you'll never get massive production runs of wine using these kind of casks, whiskies using these kind of casks, because
you always can have single casks for these.
There's not a lot of, I don't think you could ever do a 50,000 bottle run using some of these wineries. So,
But that's great because I mean, you know, this is fine if people get their hands on this. It's great, and they get to try it. And it's unique. And all of this. I'm just going to read out a few tasting notes because there's quite a lot going through. They're from a while ago. Chris Dagnan saying leather on the nose, says the wife. Peter Gilmore, you can smell the rich, strong cask to the nose, toasted spices. Yanko Banya saying your wife's spot on with a touch of leather polish afterwards. Jim Glancy, this is powerful stuff. Needs a drop of water for me, but really, really good. Steve Coleman Williams, a full-on tannery on the nose. Lovely. I'm not sure what a tannery is.
Tannery is a place where they make the leather that they.
There you go.
So yeah, I think it's like, you know, if you, yeah, the leather they make into shoes and jackets has to be tanned before they work with it. So
there you go. Okay, I did not know that. I learn something new every day. Malcolm Tucker, peat smoke floating over wet leaves on a forest floor. That is very poetic.
We've got a tasting note on this one. I think burnt somewhere along the line. I remember somebody saying Dunnage floor in a tasting note when we were sitting in the office. So that ties in with that. There's a kind of mustiness that doesn't detract from the whiskey.
Not at all. Yeah, no, it's absolutely there. I think that's what
there's layer after layer, and the finish sticks around for ages, which we love. So
it's still sticking around. It's absolutely wonderful, and it's just I love that fact that it's sweet and smoky at the same time. You just don't know what to do with it. Like your brain's kind of just like, oh man, what flavor am I focusing on here? But they're really balanced between them. But it's like really sweet, like gummy bear sweet, but then with this wonderful peatiness, which is really working.
And completely the opposite of the Islay stuff. There is, you know, Islay whiskeys are amazing. I'd love to get my hands on some casks from as many Islay distilleries as possible, but they're almost, you know, impossible to source now. But there's still a lot of people in whiskey, when you say smoky, they think Islay, because Islay's done such a great job of doing peated whiskey around the world. But this is clearly not, you know, an island.
Yeah.
Whiskey, so
absolutely. And a lot of people saying that said we're not getting those notes of, like you said, iodine, sea spray, you know, all of those kind of notes that hospital floor is always one to get from Lefroy, all of these kind of things. So we're not getting those notes. It's much more kind of wood smoke, peat smoke, bonfires, all of these kind of things. Malcolm Tucker saying palate really warming, burnt caramel, peat smoke, chili heat, finishing tobacco, smoke, and a touch of parsley. Anthony Mullins, definitely the peat and burnt caramel to taste. And your Uncle Vanya said, Tomatin and the Epicurean, I think had, how do you pronounce it again? Is it River Salt? River Salts or River Salts? River Salts.
Somebody that knows more about wine might be able to correct me on that.
C. Common Williams, smoke like dusty background taste after a forest fire. Dry but comforting. Which nice foam penny 5p now, I think, sweets. Your Uncle Vanya, herbal, but like dropping some herbs on the barbecue on a beach. You ever done that?
I love the conjuring up of images.
Sure. Your Uncle Vanya,
we need bonfires on the beaches in Scotland just
bonfire on the beaches in Scotland, yeah. Your Uncle Vanya, hint of freshly baked sourdough. Hungry now. Steve Coleman Williams, suits autumn well, I think, comforting and warm. Would suit a night out on Senny Bridge training area. Don't know where that is. Malcolm Tucker, one to have in the hip flask when out for a walk. Your Uncle Vanya, lingering sweet stone fruit mineral finish for me.
Yeah, I like the mineral notes. The hip flask comment was brilliant, actually. I think this is, you know, I don't know, that scene in the James Bond movie when he's standing there on the moor looking out across. That's the kind of whiskey for this, you know.
You've just made another bottle label there, and I'm thinking of that particular movie.
I don't know. We're trying not to do ones that the big movie people might decide to ask us for royalties for. So, you know, nothing that involves Star Wars or James Bond or anything like that. So.
Marvel or anything like that. Yeah, it's wonderful stuff. It's really interesting, and it's great. And a lot of people are saying that as well. My last question for you is actually going to be not about this, but it's actually about the distillery that you're building in Campbelltown.
Yes, I was waiting.
Yeah, no, I saved it at the end because it's not really to do with this.
No, I love yes.
I love Campbelltown, and talking of those wonderful notes, I love that beautiful Campbelltown characteristic, that sea salt, the spray, all of that. So what's going on with that?
Well, we had our planning permission granted about 2 months ago. We put the planning permission in May to repurpose an old Navy SEALs training base that sits next to Machrihanish Airport in Campbelltown. So it's the opposite end of the runway from where the Rassi people are going to be building their distillery, because they're doing a farm to bottle one. They've got a farm and they're building from scratch. But yeah, like a lot of independent bottlers, as you've probably seen in the last few years, they're either buying or building distilleries. Some of them are doing both. So, Elixir have got Tormore and they're building on Isla. Hunter Lang built Ardmore. There's one, you get your own distillery. So at some point in the future, you've got your own spirit to work with from. You can start from scratch and have a spirit. It's going to be quite a big distillery. Our one intended production capacity to start will be 2 million litres a year, because that then will give us stock that we can trade with other whiskey producers as well, because I'm sure they might be interested in Campbelltown spirit, and we'd certainly love to get hold of more and more spirit from distilleries around the country, maybe even around the world. We haven't ruled out, well, we do own casks in some distilleries in other countries. So
it's going to be called Witchburn.
The distillery is called Witchburn. When we were looking through, I don't know, there's a great book called Scotch Mist, and David Sturck's done some great books about Campbelltown as well. There's loads of distilleries down there, lots of them named after burns. So lots where we thought the name would be great, but somebody had already used it before. And when you leave Campbelltown to drive to the airport, you drive down Witchburn Road, and there's a little stream outside. It's not our water source, but it's called the Witchburn. And it was just too good a chance. It had never been used for a distillery before. So that's going to be what we call it. Well, that's what we're calling it. So
that's awesome. And I suppose like Campbelltown in general has just been, was once a golden melting pot for whiskey distilleries, and now has been, was it 3, 2?
You've got 3 there, and North Star have now had planning permission for theirs, so they're going to be there soon. We're scheduled to start, if everything arrives on time, because we've got a building that's already there and the road's already there because it's on an industrial area. We could be starting production next November.
Wow.
So we've had people out there this week surveying the site, looking at the various options. We've got stills being produced now. But so North Star, ours, and Rassi will be 6. Whether anybody else moves into Campbelltown,
what are the current distilleries? These small ones like Springbank. What do they think of this? Has this been something is it good for them? Is it raising awareness of the area?
Yeah, but, I think it's been really positive. I think about 5 minutes after the press release went out that we'd got the planning permission, I received a text message from somebody from Campbelltown saying, do you want to come to next year's Campbelltown Malts Festival? Can you do it? I mean, we're not going to have a distillery by then, but can we do something there? Can we do tastings? Lots of I know a lot of the people that work for Springbank. We see them at all the festivals, and everybody's been super positive.
That's great.
It's tricky getting accommodation. It's not like Isla. There's always a shortage of accommodation on places like Isla, but there's only a few places to stay in Campbelltown. So, but the whole idea is that it helps the local business. We're trying to use as much local trade as possible to get the distillery project moving. We're a company that's owned and operated in Scotland, so to be able to do something here in Campbelltown, which is like the legendary area, it's just a fantastic project. But yeah, now it's a whole set of hurdles because you've got to make sure everything gets delivered on time. And I think everybody I know that's ever, I'm sure Lindores will probably have the same, be able to say the same, but building a distillery, whether or not you're repurposing something that's already there or you're building from scratch, there's so many things that can delay, especially in Scotland where the weather shuts everything down for half the year and all that kind of stuff. So, but it will be great to be able to take part in the Campbelltown Festival next year and show people what our plans are. So
that's super exciting, I have to say. And I think
it's fantastic, and I can't wait. They even give you caramel wafers on the plane when you go there. So
when you joined the company, did you know that this was a thing in the pipeline, or was it something that came about?
No, I knew it was a plan.
Yeah.
The company's only 3 years old, so the plan to develop the distillery had been there from the start, I think. So
awesome. Well, I really look forward to seeing what that how that finishes and what we get to taste from you guys. But thank you very much for sharing that with us, Paul, and thank you very much for sharing that wonderful Ardmore that we got to try. Absolutely wonderful stuff. I feel like that was quite a powerful one with the pit. I'm looking at this Glenlivet now at 40%, which is a wonderful dram, but could be slightly light on the light side. But thank you very much. And if you want to stick around to the end, please do. Thank you.
And thank you, everybody, for the tasting notes. So
they say you're welcome. Right. Wonderful stuff. The time has absolutely flown by, I have to say. This has been a wonderful, wonderful tasting session so far. And like I said, we've got 2 more to try. But as always, I genuinely think that it's, 5 can be a little too much for some people to try. So please, don't feel like you need to drink these now. I'm just going to give a little bit of history about these ones, and then we will move on and invite our guests back, and I can ask my famous question. So the Glenturret 12 is what we're trying tonight. So this one, is the 2023 release of this particular 12-year-old. And Glenturret is one of Scotland's smallest distilleries, and it was originating as a farm distillery, and they've got claims that date back to kind of 1763. It's still handcrafted today, as it was centuries ago, and they are still operating what is the only hand-operated mash tun in the whole of Scotland. So really cool, small distillery. This is the 2023 release of the 12-year-old, and that 12-year-old is kind of called the heart and soul of the distillery's whiskey range, comprised of about 60 casks, and making the cut for each batch. And this is American oak, bringing this kind of wonderful kind of like caramel sweetness balanced out with the spiciness of the European oak. I really enjoyed this one. I have to say, I have actually drunk it, to be honest with you, earlier in my pre-tasting. So big fan of Glenturret. The new range, the new bottles, I actually really like the bottles, as opposed to a lot of people who didn't within the industry. But I think they're really cool. I think the rebrand's been awesome. And it's a dram that I really enjoyed. And the next one I tried was the Glenlivet, which is 15, the wonderful, the 15, the wonderful 15-year-old French Oak Reserve. We know a lot about Glenlivet, but one of the things that we always get told, and that was they recently released bottles of their illicit still kind of going old school of what it was back in the day. But Glenlivet's history dates back to 1800s, and their main part of their history is kind of illicit distilling. It was one of the first distilleries that took out an actual license to produce, legal whiskey back in 1824. After King George IV specifically requested the George Smith's whiskey on his visit to Scotland in 1822, even though at the time it was illegal. So they're also claiming to be one of the first distilleries to use French oak in production. And when we think of Glenlivet, we tend to think of that very kind of tropical kind of pineapple flavour in the new make spirit. And this kind of 15-year-old is celebrating that because it was matured in Limousin oak. So another French sweet wine cask from France's Dordogne region, where they often mature cognac. And this one I found really spicy, very fruity style, very classic Glenlivet. But the kind of density of that oak was allowing the whiskey to absorb deep into the wood, and a very, very nice Glenlivet. So it's a little bit about those whiskies. And again, if you want to try them, please do. If you don't, drink them another time. And as Steve Howdy Doody, if that's your real surname, like honestly, amazing. Is saying at last a Glenlivet on here. I'm sorry that it was a very short whistle-stop tour of that Glenlivet, but hopefully we will have another Glenlivet on at some point, and we can have somebody on much more qualified to talk about Glenlivet than me. So there we go. Right, I'm just going to invite our guests all back onto the screen as I can see them. Nathan here, who has been patiently waiting. It feels like a couple of weeks ago since we last spoke, Paul, welcome back. It's been ages, man. Like, where have you been?
No, God, I haven't seen you for ages. Have you changed your hair?
Yeah. No, I'm growing a moustache as well, like Nathan. He's inspired me. And welcome back, Murray. And thank you very much for sticking around to the end. It's been a wonderful session. Everyone's really enjoyed everything that you guys have had to say. I don't want to offend anyone, but we tend to ask a question at the end of our pour and sips, and we say, which one was your favourite dram? And obviously, we all know none of you guys are going to take offence to that, but and whiskey's totally subjective. But it is nice to know which one people like the most. So while I ask our guests a question, please, guys, let us know your favourites from tonight's tasting session. If you're lucky, I might even say mine. I'm not going to, because they were all wonderful whiskies. Not in front of you guys. There we go. Interesting. Like I always ask, kind of, you guys talk about your own whiskies and stuff like that. But you've all met each other before. But is there anything you've tasted recently that has, really caught your eye, or something you've seen that really caught your eye has been different? Nathan, start with you.
It was interesting what Murray was saying about the lowland stuff, because Daft Mill at the moment is just releasing some absolutely stunning whiskey if you can get your hands on it. It's the 15 that I tasted last year was just spectacular, and on release the price was 150, which sounds like a lot, but for such a sought after whiskey at cask strength, and that was, for me, that was amazing. I'm a little bit biased, but I think all of the new Macbeth range that Elixir have just brought out is stunning whiskey. You've got something for everyone. If you can't get the 10 grand 55-year-old Glen Grant, then you can definitely go for the Bloody Sergeant, which is a 10-year-old Blair Athol, which is absolutely stunning.
Okay, what's that in? Is that Shakespeare we're talking about again, or is it a?
Yeah, it was a big collaboration with Sir Quentin Blake, Elixir Distillers, and then Livingston, who did a lot of the packaging for Bowmore and Macallan and things like that. So just 5 acts of Macbeth, and then each character has a whiskey based on it. Dave Broom was involved in it. It's a really interesting project. I'm just waiting for my sample box to arrive. That's the main thing.
Is that Glen Grant going to be included in the sample box?
I mean, I'd like to think so, but I don't think I've worked long enough or hard enough to get one of those.
And what about yourself, Paul?
Two sort of styles that have struck me in the last year or so. I shared distributors around in several countries with Lindores, and Murray's, Drew and Helen. They've done some brilliant exclusive releases for different distributors around the world. Always worth grabbing them and trying them if you get a chance to see them, because they don't sell them here. You might have to pick them up at a whiskey fair in Germany or Netherlands. But some of the sort of cask finish work that you're doing is incredible for, again, young whiskey. And the other thing is the amount of innovation from grain whiskies coming out now. It doesn't have to be 50-year-old single grain, even though it's still affordable. But there's some amazing young grain whiskey appearing. It works really well. We've done a lot with it, but it works really well with strong first fill or really sort of lively casks. And it's budget priced, so you can drink it.
We had a 35-year-old Cameron Brig on this show before, probably one of the oldest whiskies. Actually, obviously the oldest whiskey we've had. I think it's a great grain whiskey for people to try at an affordable price, like older stock whiskey, and it's great, and I love it. It blends a grain as well. Like I think like stuff like the Compass Box Hedonism for me is just like absolutely top shelf for me. Like wonderful grain whiskey. Absolutely love that stuff. It's a really good, I think, introduction to that kind of stuff and the kind of style that it is, that cream or vanilla style.
But I do love what the younger distilleries are doing, because they knew they would be bottling their whiskey at a younger age, and they've planned for it. So Lindores, even Daft Mill, but McNean, everything's really interesting. So
we've had McNean on here, and Lindores. Not had, obviously, Daft Mill. They're not come to their whiskey on here.
Try and get Francis on this for a night. That would be fun for you.
And what about yourself, Murray?
I've always got an Achilles heel for a grain whiskey, so I can't get enough of hedonism, which you mentioned there. But I tried a nice interesting one recently. in September, I married a lovely girl from Northern Ireland. So I've been trying to expand my Northern Irish whiskey, or my Irish whiskey in general repertoire. For her dad is always very happy to throw down my neck anytime I'm over there. But I've been done a couple of shows with the guys from Hinch recently, and they've got a couple out. I tried like a stout cask from them. Obviously, being Irish, they're going to chuck something in a stout cask just to be even more Irish than their Irish whiskey. But that was really nice. And one that I'm desperate to try is actually I'd often say not judge a book by its cover, but I am definitely judging a book by its cover, because the new Rose Isle bottle, the 12-year-old, the Origami Kite one, I've yet to try. But a good friend of mine, she did the artwork for the bottle. So Rio, she did the artwork for that bottle. So I'm desperate to try that one, but I wasn't able to get hold of one. So if anybody has one in their back pocket tucked away and they're looking for something, an early Christmas present for me, then you're more than welcome to get in touch with me after.
We'll do a swap for one of these.
Absolutely.
Okay, sure thing. Who does the art? I didn't ask you, Paul. Who does the artwork for yours?
We've got a great graphic designer. She lives in Poland. She's part of the team. So we come up with the idea. We'll come up with and then we'll ask for her to do some designs. So there's Gosha and there's Pavel. They both stay in Poland. They come up with the designs for the labels.
That's cool. That's great. It's kind of like obviously not a master of malt link, but the boutique whiskey company, kind of that, like, really interesting labels and kind of really distinctive labels, and really interesting stuff. They look awesome. You kind of labels, you want to kind of line those bottles up and see them all. Do you know what I mean? In a collection, you want to see them all together.
It's great when you hear the ideas starting and then you get to see them coming through at the end. So it's a really nice thing to see the process. I imagine it's something the boutique guys have enjoyed for years. So
yeah, absolutely. Interesting. I tried a boutique whiskey, the Canadian corn, like 100% corn boutique whiskey, and absolutely wonderful. Real sucker for kind of like a 100% corn whiskey. And actually, one of my absolute guilty pleasures is some. I don't know if you've ever tried mellow corn. I sound awful saying this. It's just genuinely an absolute guilty pleasure of mine that I have often. It's just a wonderful corn whiskey. Absolutely love it.
Nothing guilty about that. It's amazing. It's the best whiskey sour whiskey.
Oh, really?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, that's interesting. I've never done that before, but that would be interesting to try.
Yeah, we need to broaden ourselves out from barley in Scotland. I love trying to find that sort of thing. I need to
the
festivals and start looking at rye and corn. There's a lot of rye whiskey starting to appear in the UK now, and I really want to try more and more of it. So
yeah,
one got great reviews. I've not tried it yet. So
we've had loads of rye whiskey on here. Best I had was from Finland. Actually, it was a Finnish whiskey called Kiro that we had on here. It's like their rye whiskey is absolutely amazing. I absolutely loved it. I'm just going to read out all the guys. If you want to close your ears, please do. I don't know how offended you're going to be. Anthony Mullins, just to preempt the dreaded question, can't make my mind up between the Miyagikyo and the Lindores Abbey, and I have tried all 5. Now, Steve Howdy Doody is saying he lives on Glenlivet. So there you go. Steve Coleman Williams, Ardmore for me. Lindores had an unfair showing, though, as I was late and tried it after Ardmore. So my turn. Yeah, I think that is slightly unfair. If you did try the Brave New Spirits, the Ardmore first, or that was the first one you tried, because that is going to definitely overpower anything afterwards. Ali C. Lindores, Ardmore, then Miyagikyo for me. Enjoying both Glens at the moment, though. Malcolm Tucker, Ardmore, but I love my peat. Saying that, I really liked the other 2. Chris Dagnan with a very good answer. All good, just different for different occasions and feelings. Yeah, that's very true. But that's not the game, Chris. That's not what we're saying here. Bob Byers. No relation to Strange Things. Ardmore is lovely, but it's between Lindores and Miyagikyo. But I think the Lindores just pipped it for me.
I really want to try this Miyagikyo now, if only because I'm going to say it before I have another dram, so that I don't trip over my tongue. Will it be on a stand at the Glasgow Festival on Saturday?
Absolutely.
Right, I'll come and find some. So I need to see. You coming up for this one?
100%.
Nice.
Wouldn't miss it.
Nice. Okay. Excellent.
There you go.
That's another excuse not to be working at Glasgow Festival. I get to go wander. I'm going to wander around and try all these whiskies. So.
It's a hard life, Paul. Hey. Your Uncle Van, you can't vote. I'm biased. Cough. The Eagle. Cough. There you go. Tony Capon. Miyagikyo #1, followed by Lindores. Your Uncle Van, fantastic choice once again, guys. Love the variety. That's, for me, the best way to appreciate new expressions. Saltai, I'm a sucker for a story. Lindores for me, but all three are wonderful. Learning to add some water to cask strength really made a difference for me too. Ali C, 24-year-old Cameron Brigg, was awesome. Still have some in the bottle, so I got it wrong. They remember way better than me. They can remember all the guests, the drams when we had it, honestly. Saltai saying the variety does make it difficult to choose tonight. It has been a really different drams all over. Ali C, 27-year-old even, just check the label. So you still have it. Okay, I haven't seen it, and you probably did it about 2 years ago. Steve Tom Williams, swaps have happened amongst a few of us punters in the South, so never say never. There you go, Murray. So that's in reference to your Christmas. Your Uncle Vanya, the Mexican Abasolo corn one is my fave so far from the wild ones, and Kiro Wood Smoke always favourite. Recommend trying if you haven't. Oh, well, thank you very much, your Uncle Vanya. That sounds very nice. I will have a look about that one. Steve Coleman Williams, not knowingly had a corn whiskey. I don't think there's much of it about. I understand, but like Balcones do their Baby Blue, which is like a proper corn whiskey, and there's a lot of Canadian stuff, but there's not that much. Even in America, it's like truly corn. And Steve Howdy Doody thoroughly enjoyed the Glenturret. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I'd say an even match for tonight's winners. I think everyone liked all the drams, which is definitely what we're going for here. So thank you all very much for joining us. Thank you, Nathan. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Murray. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you guys. As always, I don't quite know the date for the Christmas extravaganza. I'm just going to hazard a guess and then get told, no, do you know what? I'm not, because I do that and then I'm going to tell you the wrong date. So we will see you for next month for our next Pour and Sip, which will be another Christmas. It'll be our third Christmas. So join us for treats, prizes. Said prizes now. Again, I don't know if there's going to be prizes, so there will have to be now. There will definitely be prizes. And I will see you all soon. So cheers from all of us at Pour and Sip and from all our guests.
Thank you, everybody.
Cheers.